Hey there, it's time for the show, the Tatiana Show, where you make friends and talk life and crypto. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tatiana Show. We have a return special guest coming on today. We have Gene Epstein from the Soho Forum. He's formerly of Barron's, and he is a man that knows a lot about economics. With everything that's been going on with COVID last year, I wanted to get a bit more of a professional opinion on what we can expect. How does this look in relation to the past, any kind of previous, like, for example, the Great Depression? Is this similar? Is it different? And then also talk more about the debate series, because, civility and civil debate is a little bit difficult these days in the United States. So first and foremost, I'd love to open up with welcome to the show. And thank you so much for encouraging such a cool environment to exchange ideas with the Soho Forum.
Thank you for having me, Tatiana. You know how much I have to say adore and admire you. We've been together, remember that time on the Contra cruise, and I was hoping you could make it to Florida to sing a few songs where we had our recent Soho Forum debate, but you did send a present, and we could talk about that. And some wonderful people from Miami who are Bitcoin fanatics, and they charmed the hell out of me and a lot of other people as well. That's a story in itself, but maybe you can come to the Soho Forum in April. We should talk about that in a moment.
Yes, absolutely. So some people have been watching the show. They would know that I'm moving to Miami, at least for a little while.
Oh, yeah.
Sick of the cold, sick of the masks, sick of the control.
So when's that going to be? When's your final departure date going to be? You're packing
Very
up.
soon. Any day now. So I actually thought I would be there by the time that the Soho Forum was going on.
Oh, I see.
But it's taking a little bit longer. And I'm leaving for sunnier pastures.
Will you be there by April 18th or before?
I believe so. Yes, I should be there by then.
We're going back down to the villages in Florida. And I mean, that's obviously Miami is a bit of a distance away, but Florida is a long state, but it shouldn't be that much of a schlep up to the villages in Florida, where we are going to have another Soho Forum debate. Part of our breakout, part of our rebellion against the lockdowns, we have these super spreader gatherings, and we had one just a few days ago on February 18th, and that is about that debate between John Mackey and Yaron Brook, where you were supposed to be there, but apparently you got snowed out or snowed in, and so you couldn't make it. But you did send so many of your friends from Miami, so you'll be in the bosom of Miami with all those wonderful people whom I was privileged to meet at the debate. But this particular debate between John Mackey and Yaron Brook on leadership in corporations, on purposes for companies. I won't go into it in any great detail, but it is John Mackey and Yaron Brook, a very lively debate that we had at the villages in Florida. It's going to be released at the Soho Forum Debates podcast. So you podcasters want to put the Soho Forum Debates podcast in your podcast listings, because we have more than 50 debates on that podcast, a whole galaxy of stars, of people. I participated in 6 of those debates. We also are releasing it on video. But in particular, April 18th at the villages, please join our next Super Spreader party. We were amazed that we had a sold out crowd and virtually no one was wearing a mask. Masks were optional, and people optionally decided not to wear them. And indeed, of course, it's an embarrassment to the lockdowners, as we keep reminding them, as I most recently reminded them even this morning, that Florida, which has basically been an open state, its numbers are better than New York State, better than California's, where the lockdowns have happened. And Florida should be the worst by far, since it has so many old people living there who are especially, of course, vulnerable to COVID. So the rest of the country should be like Florida. Meanwhile, we're going back to Florida on April 18th.
I'm excited for April 18th. I have a lot of friends in the Orlando area. And, the nice thing is there are quite a lot of different crypto people around Florida, a lot of liberty lovers.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to see that you guys are moving it down. New York is such a strange place right now. They're saying that Broadway isn't going to open up for another year or so.
Yeah.
So I can't even imagine what future there is over here.
Yeah.
What do you think are some upcoming topics that you will be covering as we go into this next world, right? Everybody's been obsessed with Trump, but now Trump is over.
Trump has been
So,
dumped. Yeah, yeah.
so what
Well,
happens now with the world of politics? They've lost the butt of their jokes.
yeah, they lost somebody to hate. Yeah, indeed, the Trump derangement syndrome, which is difficult to give up on, has indeed left a lot of people, a lot of progressives, a bit disoriented. But I mean, I'm certainly maybe I haven't heard that thing about Broadway. I know the movie theaters in New York City are opening up. The restaurants are. I believe, picking up on your point about Trump, now that Trump has been dumped, there's certainly a strong orientation toward, on the part of the governors and mayors. And indeed, the numbers with respect to COVID are looking better on top of that. And the vaccine makers want to claim victory on top of that as well. And so I think that the country is going to open up. And there already moves in that direction. I went out to a restaurant. I should also point out that a lot of, in many ways, there's so many rules that are not even being enforced. The restaurants in New York City is supposed to be at 25% capacity. On the weekend when the 25% was declared, I was at one of my favorite restaurants. I won't name it, and it was 75% full. And so people have just lost respect for that. And then those people in the restaurants were perfectly happy, because the moment you sit down, you can take off your mask, because the COVID respects the virus, respects the fact that you're eating. It's not until you stand up that you put the mask back on. And so I think that that will continue to be the case. The movie theaters are 50% capacity. That's the declaration. Starting in a couple of weeks, they'll probably be higher than that. Madison Square Garden is opening up. So I think that the trends are in the right direction, even in New York City. Look, I'm excited for you to move to Miami. If I were not 76 years old, probably I would consider moving to Miami as well. I've been in New York for the last 50 years, and it looks as though I'm just a little bit too old to make a move. So I'm sticking here, but of course I'll be visiting you down in Florida fairly frequently, and you may occasionally drop by and visit me in New York City. But I mention that only because you talk about Trump derangement syndrome, and it does specifically relate to the fact that I think that the Great Suppression of the economy, as I called it, where it was not in many ways not really a conventional Austrian business cycle. It was really a case in which the iron fist of the government basically locked down the economy. And now that the lockdowns are being lifted, I see some upside. However, I also see risks down the road. We could pursue that for a bit. I know where you want to go with this discussion. Go ahead.
I think that there's a lot of different places to go.
Yeah.
I mean, on the topic of New York, and you made fun of the masks. The problem is that, when you stand up, Corona doesn't get you. When you sit down, Corona gets you. But I'm just kind of worried about the state of the New Yorker mindset, right? People in New York used to be tough. And now I go outside and everybody's wearing a mask and they're in the outdoors, and it's 95% of people.
Yeah.
So I do see things opening up around the country. I think that the masks are a sign of subservience, which is very, very frightening. Do you think that do you think it's that dire? Do you think that it will continue onward? Because I'm not sure that they're going to get rid of the masks, even though it's kind of senseless.
Well, bear in mind that in a way we've already, so to speak, phasing them out. Yeah, look, you're absolutely right that what has happened is that people that fear has been instilled into the hearts and minds of so many people. And by the way, I have to wave. We're on video, right? So I have to wave in order to get the light back on. So just a moment. Here we go. The light is back on. And it's important, by the way, to bear in mind that when you ask what would have happened if we'd gone the libertarian route, and that we've recognized that this is not something that government should do. Government, let us say, at least peace to the progressives. Let's say, okay, if the CDC, an arm of government, wants to release information, fine. Although I don't even know that we need it for that. But my point is that if the government had not instituted lockdowns, which of course, or any kind of intervention in the economy had been launched by government, what would have happened? One thing to bear in mind is that government's policy was to instill fear into people, and that fear remains. I guess I'm an inveterate optimist, and I think that the fear will subside over time. I think that gradually people will go back to normal. But if worst case is that we see more people, a lot of people wearing masks on the street for the next couple of years in New York City, that's not going to be awful. I mean, as I say, the restaurant I went to, it was an upscale restaurant, typical New Yorkers were there, and they weren't wearing masks sitting at the table, and it was 75% full. So isn't that a good sign? I would have loved to post a few photos of that. Just to give you a better feeling about New Yorkers, but I didn't want to do that because I didn't want to get the restaurant in trouble. And the authorities, if they're watching this, they can torture me. I will not mention the name of that restaurant. I want you to know, because I don't want to get into trouble. So again, bear in mind, here's New Yorkers. Now, they're going to go to Madison Square Garden. There's 2,000 New Yorkers. They're supposed to go to Madison Square Garden. I don't know if they're going to be wearing masks or not, but because I guess maybe they'll have to, because the cameras will be on them. People went to Tampa. A lot of went Tampa to the football game, the Super Bowl, I should mention it, and nothing happened. There were no outbreaks. I think that there is going to be a new story told that we conquered it. It's behind us. The forces of the government were triumphant. The vaccine worked. So I'm hopeful that people will come to their senses, and that I should mention as well that I visited Tokyo a couple of times. As you may know, my wife is a native of Tokyo. And years over the years, a lot of Japanese like to wear masks when they have a cold. They're very cautious people, so it's not so terrible. People are walking around with masks, but if that's the worst of it, then I don't think it'll be so terrible. So again, I emphasize the positive, even though certainly Miami, it's a warmer climate. It's exciting, and much as I hate to admire politicians, Governor DeSantis of Florida has a right to get a little pat on the back from us libertarians for keeping his state open and for giving the lie to the arguments of the lockdowners. And so, again, I'm striking an optimistic note right now, even though I do see minefields down the road. And I guess we could talk about that, because I have cautious optimism about the next couple of years, but I do see all kinds of storm clouds potentially plaguing the economy over the next decade.
That's really, I think, where we could focus. I mean, the mask thing, maybe if you're sick, you can make the argument to wear it. I think it's kind of psychologically damaging, and I worry about how you don't have facial signals, and even like the humanity of smiling and stuff. I think taking that away, especially with the younger children, is worse. But I think
completely agree with you. I completely agree. And of course, I insist on, a guy visited me and I said, I can't see your face, take off the mask. Absolutely. You're right about that. But look, again, when people sit down, and to eat, they take off the mask, So imagine you sitting down to eat. All right, I belabor the masks enough because you and I are on the same page about that. And I guess we should now talk about the downside, the catastrophes to come, and what we're going to say. Yeah.
Well, that's right. So I heard that, a lot of empires, they fall after 250 years.
Oh.
Sounds like we're around that mark. Things are looking bleak. And I was talking with a friend of mine, and he was looking at the precursors to the Great Depression, and it seems like the stock market fell 3 times, I guess, really quite strongly. And so when they liken the current stock market faltering to that period of time, it in fact has done a similar move. Now, maybe I have some of the details wrong there, but there do seem to be some parallels going on. But we're living in a completely different, very observed time where everybody is constantly assaulted by information. Now we have the option of Bitcoin. We've seen Bitcoin go up to 58,000. It's on sale today for 48,000. So get your Bitcoins now. But, what do you think is going to happen up in the upcoming years with the economy?
Yeah. Well, look, first of all, Tanya, you can't time the market. You're really going to time the Bitcoin market. It might go down further, it might go up. And the only thing you can do is think in terms of the very long term with Bitcoin. It will, quoting a couple of decent sources whom I won't name specifically, it could go to 1 million. But we don't know when or how soon. And so my particular regimen, I do recommend the old-fashioned dollar cost average. I've ducked your question. I'm just going into Bitcoin for a moment to give it the framework. I do what's called dollar cost averaging. Young people like you probably don't know a whole lot about it. You do know about it?
I do. So I was going to say, this is supposed to be the most effective way of buying Bitcoin. Everybody says trading this, and all the new people, they want to get into trading, but you're supposed to do exactly what you're prescribing, the boring method, but that's the best method.
Well, sure. Well, yes. Although here's my funny story, which I've told on Twitter, is that I started this pretty late in the day. I started it in August. And of course, to my embarrassment, I have to confess, I'm doing it through Coinbase. And I guess I should convert to buying a key. Coinbase, to the old farts who are big fans of your show, I'm sure, Tatiana, is that Coinbase basically it's like a brokerage house, like a bank. They buy the Bitcoin for you, and they just give you, they keep your account, and you just go online and you can check the course of your holdings. And of course, they charge a fee to do this, but it's pretty reasonable. So I told Coinbase, debit my account every month by $1,000, my bank account, and buy some Bitcoin for me. But I pressed the button 3 times in August. And so I didn't know what the heck I was doing because I'm pretty inept. So I bought $3,000 worth in August. And
great job.
Great job. Yeah, right. Because I'm inept and an idiot when it comes to computers. And so great job, which of course means that with the benefit of hindsight, what am I doing with this cockamamie dollar cost averaging thing? I should have bought it all in August, and I would have been far richer because, as we know, August turned out to be a good time to buy. But who the heck knew that? But I luckily bought 3,000 worth. But what I'm trying to admit to is that based upon different scenarios, dollar cost averaging is not necessarily the best way. With the benefit of hindsight, I should have bought everything in August and then held. But we don't know how the future will be, and it calms you a little bit, I think, to know that if Bitcoin goes down, you're going to buy more of it because you're going to buy $1,000 worth. If Bitcoin goes up, you're going to buy less of it. So you're conservative, and you let the robot do it for you, and you recognize that you can't call the turns of the market in the near term. On the other hand, if there's any geniuses out there who think they can call the turns in the market, then I respect them, and best of luck to you. Knock yourself out. Now, I also buy gold. And that's because I'm an old fart. I'm diversified. I think I see the potential for gold if the storm clouds arise. And these days, of course, I'm buying more gold, $1,000 worth of gold every month. I'm buying more gold than I used to, because gold price is down. And so that's what I'm up to. Now, the point about now, but by and large, but I do own a lot of stocks and bonds. My portfolio is still now. again, I'm a 76-year-old and I make a few dollars here and there. I donate my services to the Soho Forum. And so I don't have a whole lot of income. I know you're fascinated by my finances, my personal finances.
No, I think people want to know how to diversify their money. I actually am specifically thinking of getting a financial advisor. So this is not financial advice, but
yeah. Well, you can't. Well, this is not financial advice. This is just me talking. And so you want to get one. You want to have to pay. You want to pay to some idiot financial advisor who'll tell you pretty much what I'll tell you, but you'll feel better because you paid for the advice. Now you're getting it for free, and you get what you pay for. It's just worth nothing. What I'm telling you. But this is what I'm doing. I'm also in stocks and bonds. Now, look, I made a lot of money in stocks and bonds. It's done quite well for my portfolio over the last 10 years. And now, I guess when I speak about the last 10 years, I guess I want to use that as my framework to speak about the future. I only want to say this, that 10 years ago, we could have been saying the same things that we're saying today. Now it's gotten worse, I admit, but what I mean about that is that a lot of doom and gloomsters, a lot of people who have a strong voice among free marketeers were pretty much declaring a major recession every damn year since 2012. Don't be the stock market's going to crash. All of those dire forecasts were being made continually by a lot of different people. Who knows? You may even have interviewed a couple of them over the years, for all I know. So now that didn't happen. And certainly from an investment standpoint, the fact that I was building up a 401k and other holdings I had in the stock market, a part of the reason why I'm just sitting pretty in my retirement. So the point is that now, of course, the stock market could crash and I may have to eat my words. But my only point is that we should gain a little bit of humility by looking back on the past and recognize, and I mean the relatively recent past of the last 10 years. It wasn't just Paul Krugman who, on the evening that Trump won the presidency, and he noticed at 3 a.m. that the stock market was crashing. Krugman said the stock market is crashing, it's never going to come back. Now, exactly the reverse happened. The economy did grow, albeit at a snail's pace, 2% a year. And also the stock market did rise. And this was despite, basically despite, not because of what the Federal Reserve and what the government was doing. So now the Federal Reserve and the government is doing the same damn thing, except worse, and we're predicting another Armageddon. Now, I don't think that is likely, and I want to return to my likely in the near term, at least. I want to return to the point I emphasized earlier, which is that we went through in 2020 what I call the Great Suppression. It was not a conventional business cycle downturn. It was simply that the government declared that businesses had to shut down. That the government declared that all the movie theaters, all the stadiums, all the restaurants simply had to shut down. So that's what brought about the recession. That was like a plague. That wasn't a business cycle, a conventional business cycle recession. So therefore, I do see resurgence. I do see resurgence because the economy is opening up, and the economy hit bottom a couple of quarters ago, and it's going to continue to rise given the fact that the service sector is opening up. So I want to point out that that's an important strand in what's going on. And just for that reason alone, I don't see it as analogous directly with the 1930s Great Depression period. I can see a lot of other differences in the 1930s the Depression, but I think that is at least one key difference. On the other hand, it's fairly easy to point out that in 10 years, Now I'm going to start with the easiest forecast. In 10 years, the debt of the U.S. government is going to be so burdensome. The need the need to finance the debt is going to be so crushing that we will likely face a fiscal crisis. So I'm talking about 10 years from now. Just for starters, I'm talking about 10 years from now. Fiscal crisis. The dollar will become unstable, and for that reason, it's good that by then I will own a lot of Bitcoin and a lot of gold. I don't know about you, but I'll be okay, because that will be an opportunity for alternative currencies. That's the silver lining in this, by the way. Those who debate whether Bitcoin can become money, whether gold can become money, they often don't admit that it has to come through a crisis. It will be wrenching. There will be a turn toward Bitcoin and gold because the dollar has to. The only way to turn toward these currencies, gold or Bitcoin, will be if the dollar loses the ability to instill confidence in people that your dollars will be worth what they were worth yesterday or what they will be worth this afternoon. So that's where I see an opportunity, and that's where I see problems down the road. But I will also stipulate that there are all kinds of other unknowns. The degree to which the Federal Reserve have printed trillions of dollars is absolutely unprecedented. And so in that sense, I would say that it's almost foolish to look for precedent, except to know that that's a potentially deeply destabilizing thing to do. Now, they printed a lot of money 10 years ago too, and the U.S. economy leads a charmed life. It leads a charmed life because and the dollar leads a charmed life because we always have to ask, what are the alternatives? The U.S. economy muddles through. It does badly, but then compare it with the other economies. It leads a charmed life partly because price inflation has been muted, has not been very disturbing, and that, I think, saved the stability of the dollar over the last 10 years. Now, right now, with respect to price inflation, I don't see it likely that price inflation will explode over the next year or two, because we have very slack labor markets right now. Also, because I think that cheap labor abroad, which also I think modified price inflation, is going to continue to be a factor. It's been a factor for the last 20 years. The opening up of the economy and the access to cheap labor abroad, I think, has muted the potential for prices to explode.
Can you explain to me what is the slack labor market? Just
Well,
because I'm not familiar with
sure.
that term.
Well, that's a good question, because again, I appreciate it when I use, jargon that somebody interrupts me and asks, what the hell are you talking about? A slack labor market, I only mean that the unemployment rate is high at this point. That while, of course, it's a little lopsided in certain respects, there's certain tightness in the labor market, but by and large, if you have a high unemployment rate, that's like a slack labor market, a lot of supply of labor. And no, certainly in the history of the U.S., with respect to the history of the double-digit inflation of the 1970s, it started with a tight labor market, with a low unemployment rate, and with wages rising. The most important price in this economy is the price of labor, and so if you have a fair amount of surplus labor, the potential for that price to rise and to accelerate its rise is limited, and for that reason, I don't see that inflation is going to explode on the upside over the next couple of years. On the other hand, there are so many, and now I guess in a way, I'm making it easy on myself by saying that I see problems 10 years from now, and what I see 2 years from now, 3 years from now are a lot of, as the economy recovers, as the lockdowns are lifted, as as we begin to see a reasonable amount of economic growth, and as the unemployment rate begins to decline, once we hit a lower unemployment rate, and once we bear in mind that we could have another housing bubble because house prices are exploding on the upside, and mortgages are being interest rates are very low. Mortgages are being released to people who aren't necessarily able to keep paying those mortgages. I see problems in that regard. I see the potential for inflation to take off on the other side. I see potential for different kinds of malinvestment to arise just from the money printing. So I see risks, although it's tempered by my consideration that a lot of these things are really just what happened in the past, and we didn't collapse. We didn't have the Great Depression, and therefore I believe that it's very difficult to predict with any confidence that we're going to have any kind of major downturn. I return only to the point that the trends over the next 10 years are pretty much baked in the cake. The government is going to continue to overspend. The deficits will continue to rise. The debt will continue to rise. The fiscal crisis is inevitable sooner or later, maybe sooner rather than later. I see it 10 to 12 years from now. So that's probably not a very satisfactory answer to your very difficult question. It's the best I can do. But if you have a question about it, then let's discuss it. Yeah.
I that was very thorough. I wrote down a few notes.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So I like that you're optimistic. I do think that we're, headed toward doom.
Right. Okay. Yeah, right.
Especially because
that's so typical. Yeah, that I'm optimistic. Talking to an Austrian like that makes me an optimist. I can assure you that a lot of people, like the fellow, would call me a pessimist. But of course, in this context, I sound optimistic. Absolutely. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so I have
it's all relative. That's all I'm saying.
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a couple questions.
Yeah.
This is something that I covered on this show, but I think it's really important to reiterate to people.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pushing for, we're going to have a $15 minimum wage.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
What would be the impact of that kind of a policy on the economy, and would it help poor people make more money?
Yeah, with respect to the $15 minimum wage, I mean, this answer may surprise you a bit. I think it's pretty much like the fact that the restaurants I went to was 75% full when it was supposed to be only 25% full. I know from some research into, for example, the car wash industry, that they were, when the minimum wage was rose, they found that it wasn't being enforced, and they just ignored it. The rise in the minimum wage is going to hurt for sure. To $15 is going to hurt.
But why? That's the thing, right? People wonder. They say, well, but what? They're poor. They should get at least $15. That's a livable wage. Why are you so mean? Why won't you give it to them?
Well, yeah, and of course I should counter these to these people and say, well, then why are you so mean with this $15 minimum wage? How about a $50 minimum wage? It seems to me that you're probably a lot meaner than I, because I want everybody to earn $50 an hour. In fact, $55 an hour. But in fact, I'd like the people in Bangladesh to earn $65 an hour, because it's time that those people got their returns. But unfortunately, the problem is that we have a lot of people in the economy whose marketable ability to earn a wage is such that they can't be employed profitably at $15, and that's mostly young people. It's and young people in particular need a start in the economy, and they're going to be denied it. The Congressional Budget Office, which is a mainstream agency of the federal government, concluded that there would be 1.4 million jobs lost that could potentially be created if the $15 minimum wage is phased in over the next couple of years. They themselves said 1.4 million jobs lost. And those 1.4 million jobs would be held by the most vulnerable, by the weakest, by the least marketable, because those are the people who get shafted the earliest. If a minimum wage rises, if a minimum wage rises to $15, then there will be some people who will see a raise. If you're employing 100 people and at $10 and the minimum wage rises to 15, you're not going to lay off all those 100. You will pick and choose your most valuable people. You'll shrink your output, but you might continue to employ 60 of them, and you'll lay off the other 40. But the 40 people you lay off, of course, will be your most marginal employees. Those people who are most in need of work experience. And so I think that the minimum wage really is the most unkind measure of all, because it shafts the weakest and most vulnerable. So I didn't know about that. I didn't know you were going to ask me that question. I figured your audience was sophisticated enough. I think you've just insulted your audience. Your audience was sophisticated enough to know that that wages are determined through market forces, and that all of the myths they tell that the progressives tell about the minimum wage are just opinions they take out of their butts. Like one of the arguments they typically make is that low wage workers are too stupid to shop around for the best deal that they can get. They just are clueless. It's like they don't ever talk to their family. It's like they don't ever have friends. It's like they don't learn. We're supposed to think that they don't ask, well, what are you earning at that place? Well, I'm earning more. That they don't share information. So it's this sort of condescending contempt for low-skilled people to think that they don't shop around for the best deal they can get in terms of their potential to earn a living. So that's part of the myth about the minimum. Well, the other myth about the minimum wage is that it's a good thing because if you bring about a minimum wage, then a firm is going to have less labor turnover. You may have heard that one. You pay them a nice wage and they won't quit on you. As though the people who run the business are so stupid as not to recognize that labor turnover is part of what they have to consider when they determine a wage. Now, and of course, we all have to concede that there are lots of clueless businesses, lots of clueless employees. You and I are occasionally clueless about our opportunities as well. But
very rarely.
Very, very, very rarely in your case, but in my case, who knows, I miss out. But the point is that we're supposed to think that this one-size-fits-all iron fist of government rule about the $15 minimum wage is instituted by smart people at the top, by Joe Biden, who favors the minimum wage. We're supposed to think that that's the guy who can advise businesses and can advise workers about where their best opportunities lie. Of course, it's ridiculous, but we hear these arguments continually from the progressives, and they will never quit. Of course, the main talking point, if you're not a libertarian, but at least if you say, well, let's have the government intervene in certain ways, is that you can enhance the earned income tax credit if you want to help low-wage workers. The earned income tax credit is essentially that if you earn a low wage, you get a subsidy. So that means then that the government, the taxpayers pay a subsidy to a low-wage earner, and rather than forcing a small business to do so. So that at least just gives the lie to how ridiculous the idea of the minimum wage is, when interventionists should see that if they want to intervene in the low wage market, there are other ways of doing so rather than instituting a higher minimum wage. Obviously, you and I know that there should be no minimum wage laws at all. Indeed, it's not just that sometimes you might have a zero wage. It's that sometimes you might have a negative wage. There might be times, if we had a healthier society, everybody would graduate from school at the age of 13. It's my bar mitzvah plan. At the age of 13, you pursue a career, because the vast majority of kids are not interested in sitting in a classroom, listening to somebody lecture them. They're not interested in spending all their time reading books and articles. They want to have experiential learning. Book reading and lecturing, that comes later in life for the vast majority of kids. And so at the age of 13, they should be given the opportunity to pursue different careers. And for many of them, it would be that they would pay for an apprenticeship with a law firm, for example. We should do away with a society in which you need to go to college and law school in order to practice divorce law, in order to practice real estate law. I mean, those are two kinds of law I've hired in my time, real estate and divorce law. And it's plain to me that if I just apprenticed myself to a firm for 6 months, I could learn the ropes without having to go to college and that would, of course, improve the opportunities of low-wage people. Let's see, I digressed on that. My only point is that the real wage is potentially negative, because the young people, who by and large are those who earn the minimum wage, are those people who are most in need, not of money. They're often living with their folks. They don't need money. They need experience. And the real on-the-job training that they can get by working in a firm is the real value they get from a job, far more than whatever that job pays. And in many cases, I could tell you, as a journalist, I took on interns, but after a while, I had to teach the interns something, and it was a lot of time and spent, and so it was really not worth enough to me to do it. But if somebody maybe paid me to take on interns, at least if there was a financial incentive, I could have helped a lot of kids become decent economic journalists and contribute to society that way. But it just wasn't worth my time to do it even when I paid the intern nothing. So I speak from personal experience. So again, the real minimum wage should be negative for young people, for many of the young people. But of course, when you're apprentice, you often contribute by just sweeping out, by doing other menial tasks, in return for which you get training. And so that's really the way the labor markets should operate. We should abolish college. We should abolish high school. I got on my hobby horse that way, and allow kids to enter the labor market at the age of 13. And level and make the labor market a completely level playing field, so that you can become a lawyer or start, in fact, apprenticing yourself as a medical person at the age of 13. Work in a hospital, learn the ropes. There might be classroom experience that you can acquire while you're learning to be a physician. There's no reason why we can't have trained surgeons who are 20 years old. They shouldn't have to wait until they're 30 years old. And that would open up vast opportunities for people of limited means. Now, I got off that particular hobby horse, and I want to return to your question about the effects of the minimum wage. It's only that that a dirty little secret is that the progressives like to write a lot of laws that they don't want to enforce. You wonder, maybe they secretly suspect, particularly now, by the way, with respect to COVID, we're really seeing that. I mean, I arrived at the airport at LaGuardia in New York City, and there was a phalanx of soldiers there. And they handed me a form that I had to fill out about where I'd been, what I was doing, and so on. And I thought, if I don't answer, are they going to quarantine me? What are they going to do? It was a form about COVID, where I'd come from, and whether I had symptoms. I forget what else I had to put down. And so I was almost going to put down phony information, but I said, oh, I'll put down the truth and see what happens. So I then hand the form to the next phalanx of soldier, and that's it. That was the end of it. I never heard from them again. I mean, they have so many intimidating shows of force out there that come to absolutely nothing. So they're not enforcing COVID regulations. And historically, just like they didn't enforce prohibition, people needed their drink during the era of prohibition in the 1920s. Of course they do arrest people for marijuana and for heroin, but alcohol, of course, is the drug of choice in this society. And in the 1920s, prohibition was not enforced. Anybody could get a drink. Similarly, the minimum wage is not enforced. Now, it is enforced in certain very visible companies. They have to protect themselves. But the vast majority of companies that pay the minimum wage are too small to really be concerned that there's going to be a police raid, because again, the enforcers are few and far between. And so for that reason, it's empirically the case that the minimum wage is honored in the breach. And that was the first answer I was going to give you. I didn't know that you and I had to lecture our audience on the problems of the minimum wage, but once we've gotten over that lecture, we can also say that the problem is greatly exaggerated because of the fundamental hypocrisy of progressive government. They write a lot of laws that are not enforced, and after a while, people get the feeling, and in fact, in the particular industry that I just cited, where research was done in the car wash industry, they know that their chances of getting caught are so limited that it's worth the risk. And so they don't abide by the minimum wage laws that were passed a few years ago. So
right. But I feel like this is just something that they can selectively enforce. Sometimes I'll do something and people will be like, oh, well, maybe you don't have to pay taxes on that. And I say, no, I have to follow the rules because I'm very critical of the government. And so when they have all of these rules in place, they can kind of target you, because then they'll be like, oh, I got you. So I get a little bit nervous about breaking the law.
Well, all right. You don't, maybe you shouldn't run a car wash company then. Maybe you're just not qualified for that. Maybe you don't have the Sitzfleisch to
maybe
do
not.
that. This could be just an opportunity that you can't pursue. I'm sorry to say.
I know, I'm very disappointed, but I want to.
My point is that the reality is that there's a lot of entrepreneurial energy, a lot of gutsy people out there in the business world, many of whom I greatly admire, and so they recognize that they're not going to get caught, and that they will just do what they want to do, because they recognize the government is too hypocritical to enforce it. The politicians can say, we have it on the books, and look, it hasn't even caused much harm. And you know why? Because you didn't enforce it. That's often the reality, and particularly true of the minimum wage. I interrupted you. You were going to ask a question.
Well, we're coming up on the hour, so I wanted to touch on one more thing.
I've got a couple of more hours of wisdom here, and you're cutting me off. Go ahead.
We're going to have you back on then. That's okay. We could do a repeat. I like it.
Okay, sure.
Okay, so recently there was all this information about GameStop. You said that you're still putting your money in the stock market. I am not a stock market investor, but based on what happened there, I said, this is a rigged game. Why am I going to bother? The same thing about the elections. I look at that, I say, something's a little bit funny. Why even bother? What do you think of the people's faith in these things? You liken it to previous times, and maybe there's some similarities, some dissimilarities, but we have the internet now, and we all have information that we didn't have previously, right? And you can literally gang up against the hedge funds and pick GameStop. But in the end, the hedge funds won, right? They wouldn't let the people hold up. I think they would only let them sell. They wouldn't let them buy. And so they kind of controlled the outcome. I just feel like the whole system seems
really
transparently broken. I wouldn't have any faith.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned that about GameStop. I have to admit that I haven't been tracking it over the last couple of weeks, but certainly, I mean, there was a lot of initial victories won by the people who went up against the hedge funds, and I think that hedge funds got burned. That, of course, is a long story in itself. I'd have to explain to your audience how the stock market works, how short selling works. But the
We should do
punchline,
an episode about
yeah,
that.
okay, sure,
Like just really like
yeah,
basic
yeah,
financial stuff, because
sure, yeah,
I think that there's a lot of people that are new to
yeah,
crypto
yeah,
that are now new to finance, and
yeah.
they're, getting their feet wet. That's why sometimes I ask these basic questions, because people will say, well, why don't you want a minimum wage? You're so cruel. And I say, well, there's a reason.
Yeah.
It's not just that I want everybody to be poor.
The reason is
So
I
I
don't
like
want
to
to
cover that
shaft.
stuff.
I don't want to shaft the weak and vulnerable. That's why.
Exactly.
It's because I'm compassionate. That's why is what you really have to say. Not you're the cruel one, because you tell yourself a lot of lies about what it could do to people. But with respect to GameStop, I'd have to do a little homework to get up to date on the ultimate outcome with GameStop. But at least my punchline is that it was a very exciting story. And by the way, it wasn't just GameStop. It was AMC theaters. I'll tell you this, as a movie lover, it was really a crazy irony that AMC multiplexes were deeply in debt, and they also were shorted by the hedge funds, and then the same GameStop people started to buy up AMC, and they rescued the company. Did you know a lot of the debt that the company had got wiped away because the stock got so high that the debt got converted to equities? So it was just one of the craziest events ever, that what these people did actually altered the fate of the movie multiplexes, a major movie multiplex chain. That's another really fun part of the story. And so I'm looking forward to going back to the movies in March when they open up. So that gets back to my story. But anyway, I've just been giving the punchlines, but I guess we could, if we spoke again on another day, we could talk about what exactly happened, how short selling works, how the stock market works, and how what actually did occur was in a way very heartening and unprecedented. The use of the internet on the part of the little guy to go. It was a David and Goliath story, and you and I, as libertarians, we always root for the little guy, since we are little guy libertarians by definition, because we're in a minority. And the little guys certainly won a lot of victories against the hedge funds in that particular case. And we could talk about that story another day.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah.
So one last thing, since
Yeah.
we're not giving away actual financial advice, we're just
No.
talking, but nonetheless, what would you say are the best safe havens for money going forward?
That's what I'm saying.
Best safe havens for 2021 for your money?
Bitcoin and gold, like I said.
Really? Okay. I like that.
Well, excuse me. Of course, see that question. Yeah, I mean, certainly when you ask for safe havens, that's really it. But of course, I guess that means in particular that you aren't necessarily parking your money in a source of funds that you might need next year or the year thereafter. So I'm talking about money that you might have over the long term. If you need to have a cash cushion, and the cash cushion, you could put it under a cushion these days because the interest rate that banks offer you is so little. The government does protect your money. So that depends in particular on your portfolio. What is your net worth? So just tell me your net worth right now, and then I can begin to give you some more specific advice.
No, I'm not giving you my net worth.
You're not giving me? Oh, okay.
Well, no, not to you and my audience. Not today.
It's too private. Okay, then let's talk. Oh, okay, yeah. Fair enough. But what I'm saying is that it depends a lot on your finances. But the simple answer about a safe haven, if indeed given the proviso that this is where you want to invest your money for the long term. This is But I'll back off on that and say that despite that, I guess I'm filled with contradiction. The stock market has had a fantastic run over the last 150 years. Even through the Great Depression, there was never a 20 or 30-year period, never a 20-year period, I should stipulate, when the stock market didn't beat inflation. That's even through the Great Depression. of the 1930s when there was a stock market crash. And therefore, I would say that that in terms of your savings for retirement, I would say that a certain amount accumulated in stocks and a certain amount accumulated in Bitcoin and gold, despite my forecast, even assume a Great Depression is coming based upon the past, the stock market, which by and large does consist of entrepreneurial companies. A lot of them are crony capitalist bastards, I admit, but of course, to some degree, they benefit. But bear in mind that as bad as things are, I do believe that there still is a lot of very sound entrepreneurship in this economy. There are companies that are worth buying in the stock market, so we don't really at this point have a completely dominated crony capitalist system, and therefore, when you buy the stock market, you're not doing anything sinful. By and large, you are investing in capitalism, which you and I respect and admire. So you shouldn't feel bad doing that. So my more complete answer is a safe haven for the long run would be stocks, gold, and Bitcoin. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I'm gonna play around with stocks next time, and we'll have a discussion about that one.
Yeah.
One more time, everybody. I highly recommend that everybody check out the Soho Forum. You have the podcast now. There are over 50 different debates. And it's not just libertarian number one versus libertarian number two. You get a lot of different perspectives.
Different people. Yes.
If you guys are in Florida in April, come and hang out with us in Orlando. I will be singing. We'll be talking a little,
Yes, if you come, you promised to sing a couple of songs.
I'm excited for that.
For warm-up acts, and now you've got to fulfill your promise on April 18th. I am, okay, this may not be too exciting. In my third time out debating the socialists in Florida, I'm going to debate socialism and capitalism on April 18th at the Villages, but I put on a good show, so come. And that's April 18th. Also, again, the Soho Forum Debates podcast, where you can listen to all our podcasts. And then one thing I did not announce is that I guess it's on June 26th, we're going to be up at PorcFest in New Hampshire, and we're going to have a Soho Forum debate there. And also, I'm going to be delivering a separate lecture at PorcFest. Have you ever been to PorcFest?
I've been to PorcFest many times. I might even see you up there. I hope so. It's one of my favorite events of the year.
Oh, you are good. Well, we'll definitely see each other up there. Yeah. And I wanted to inform everybody, as I have to remind myself, it refers to porcupines, not pigs. P-O-C. And despite the fact that you see photos of scantily clad guys toting guns up at PorcFest, I don't believe anybody has ever even been injured by a gun, much less shot and killed. So it's a very safe place to go.
It's a lot of fun, and it's actually very, very family friendly. So check out PorcFest, everybody. Go to the Soho Forum, find out all the information there. Thank you very much, Gene. We're going to have a whole financial, maybe, framework discussion another time.
Some free financial advice, once again, from me. It will
Excellent.
be imparted in that particular occasion. So see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye now. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
What's the point of all this technology without a little love in our lives? Our hosts, Tatiana Moroz and Lauren Kasovitz, have come together to bring you Proof of Love. Go to proofoflovecast.com. The Tatiana Show has been brought to you by CryptoMediaHub.com, a boutique marketing and PR agency for Bitcoin and beyond. Hey there, it's time for the show, the Tatiana Show, where you make friends and talk life and crypto. We gotta think and reflect and use lots of intellect with our hearts when we work together. I know that it can be so hard out there, looking all around and saying that life ain't fair. So that is why we will fight and stay up late at night, listening to the Tatiana Show. Thank you for listening to The Tatiana Show. Please follow us on Twitter at Queen Tatiana or on Facebook and Instagram at Tatiana Moroz Music. More episodes can be found at thetatianashow.com, and make sure you leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends. You are listening to The Tatiana Show. This show may contain adult content, language, and humor and is intended for mature audiences. If that's not you, please stop listening. Nothing you hear on The Tatiana Show is intended as financial advice, legal advice, or really anything other than entertainment. Take everything you hear with a grain of salt. Oh, and if you're listening to us on an affiliate network, the ideas and views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of the network that you're listening on or of any sponsors or any affiliate products you may hear about on this show.